Vielen Dank, Herr Snower.
Thank you, Mr. Snower.
Sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, auch ich
Ladies
freue
and
mich,
gentlemen, I am
heute
also
hier zu sein.
delighted to be here today.
Die deutsche Bundesregierung ist bei ihrer
The
Tagung ja außerordentlich
German
gut
federal
vertreten.
government is very well represented here at your meeting.
Man muss, wie mir eben schon gesagt
And
worden ist, ja
as
hier
I
sein,
was
weil man
told,
ansonsten
you
gefragt
have
wird,
to
ob
be
man noch
here,
im Amt
otherwise
ist.
you're being asked whether you're still in office.
Wir können das auflösen.
So we can solve that
Ja, meine
and answer.
Damen und Herren, wir leben in
And ladies and
spannenden
gentlemen, we
Zeiten.
are living in interesting
Und ich
times.
stelle das
And
zurzeit in meinem
at the
Amt
moment
außerordentlich
in
intensiv
my
fest,
office,
ob
this
in
is
New York bei
something
den
that I'm
Vereinten
intensively
Nationen, in Addis
discovering,
Abeba bei
be
der
it in
Afrikanischen
New York with the
Union
United Nations and Addis
oder vor
Abeba
einer
with the
Woche in
African
Buenos
Union
Aires
or
bei
in
meinen
Buenos
Kolleginnen
Aires
und Kollegen beim
1 week ago with my
G20-Treffen.
colleagues
Es
at
stand
the
immer
G20
eine
meeting.
Frage
There
im
was always
Vordergrund.
one question that
Reicht
was in
unsere
the
Kraft
foreground.
und
Will
Entschlossenheit,
our strength and our
gemeinsame Antworten auf die
determination be
aktuellen
enough in order
Herausforderungen
to
zu
find
finden,
joint
insbesondere
answers
die
to the current
Bedrohung
challenges,
unserer
especially to the threat of our
multilateralen Weltordnung.
multilateral world
Und wenn
order?
man einen Blick
And
in die Medien wirft und
if
nicht nur in die
you look at the
deutschen,
media, not only at the
die
German media,
permanenten Probleme und Krisen, mit denen wir
and the daily
konfrontiert sind,
crises and problems we're
sich
confronted
anschauen
with
und
on a daily
feststellen, dass
basis,
viele
we
immer mehr miteinander
discover that more
zusammenhängen,
and more are
dann
interconnected.
kann man sich in etwa
And you
vorstellen,
can roughly
wie auf
imagine
internationalen
how
Konferenzen
at international
im Moment
conferences
die
at the
Diskussionen
moment
verlaufen.
the
Ich freue
discussions
mich
are
deshalb
ongoing. And
sehr,
this is why
dass
I'm
ein
very
Forum wie
pleased that a
dieses
forum like
hier in
this
Berlin
one
zusammengekommen
has come
ist,
together here in
gemeinsam an
Berlin in
großen
order
Fragen, an
to work
internationalen
on
Lösungen zu
the major
arbeiten.
issues and find
Und als
international solutions
Bundesregierung
for
sehen wir
them.
das
As
Global
the German
Solution
federal
Summit
government,
als
we see the
wichtigen
Global
Ort,
Solutions Summit as an
als ein
important
Ausdruck
place, as
produktiver
an expression
Diskussion,
of
aber auch vor allen Dingen
productive
in der Erwartung,
debate,
einen
and
Impulsgeber
also
zu haben
we expect
für die
to have
gegenwärtige
somebody
Politik.
who will provide us
Die
with
Auseinandersetzung darum, wie wir als
inspiration
internationale
for the
Gemeinschaft
current policy
zusammenarbeiten
making
wollen,
and
jetzt,
trying to find
aber
out
auch
how
in
we
den
can work
nächsten
together as an
Jahren,
international community
welche
now
Lösungen
and
möglich
in the
sind
coming
und
years,
wie wir
what the
einen
possible
Rückfall in
solutions
eine
can be,
Welt
and
voller
how we can
Machtkonkurrenz
prevent
verhindern
a
können.
fallback into a world
Diese
full of power
Auseinandersetzung ist
rivalries.
heute wichtiger denn
This
je.
is a discussion
Und
which
das
is more
fordert auch
important than
von der
ever,
deutschen
and
Außenpolitik
therefore German
Kraftanstrengung
foreign
und durchaus
policy
auch
is
neue
something that
Kraftanstrengung.
requires a major effort
Die
and also new
Weltordnung
efforts.
sortiert sich
The
gerade neu.
world order is
Und nicht
currently
überall,
rearranging itself,
das
and
müssen wir
not
uns auch
everywhere
vergegenwärtigen,
this is something we need to
nicht
be
überall
aware
ruft
of.
dieser
Not
Befund
everywhere
Unruhe
this is something
oder
that
Sorgen
is causing
Während hier in
unrest or
Europa vor allem
concern.
das vermeintliche
Whereas
Ende der
over here
westlichen
in Europe,
Weltordnung
the
beklagt wird,
perceived
stehen
end of the
anderswo
Western world
vielmehr die
order is
Chancen im
complained about.
Vordergrund.
Elsewhere, the opportunities
Chancen, die durch
are
die
much
digital
more
beschleunigte
in the foreground.
Globalisierung und den
Opportunities
Aufstieg neuer
created by the
Mächte
accelerated digital
entsteht.
globalization and the rise of new
Natürlich
powers.
begrüßen auch wir
And
im
of course,
Grundsatz
we
einen Wandel der
basically
Weltordnung.
welcome a
Denn eine
change
stärkere
of the world
Teilhabe
order,
unserer
a
Partner
stronger
weltweit
participation
an
of
der
our
Global
partners
Governance,
globally in the
an
global
ihren
governance,
Institutionen,
in
aber
its
auch an
institutions,
den
but
damit
also in
verbundenen
the
Rechten und
rights and
Pflichten,
obligations that come
ist
with
etwas,
it,
was wir als
is
unbedingt
something
erforderlich
that we
halten.
believe is absolutely
Was wir derzeit
necessary.
vielerorts
So
erleben,
what
das
we're
ist aber
currently
etwas völlig
experiencing
anderes.
in many
Deshalb haben wir ein
places
Problem
is
damit.
something
Es ist
completely
keine
different. This is why
Anpassung
we
oder
have a problem.
Weiterentwicklung
It
des
is no
Bestehenden. Es geht
adaptation
nicht
or
um ein
further development of
inklusiveres
the status
System
quo. It is not
Update,
about
eine
having
liberale
a more
Weltordnung
inclusive
2.0.
system update, a liberal world
Nein,
order
wir empfinden
2.0.
manche der
No,
gegenwärtigen
some of the
Veränderungen
current
als
changes
Verschlechterung,
are
mit
perceived
denen
by
wir
us
uns
as
auch nicht abfinden wollen.
deterioration, and this is
Die
something we do
Rückkehr
not
zu
want to put up with.
Nullsummendenken
The
und zu
return
neuen
to
Nationalismen
zero-sum
setzt die
thinking
Idee
and to new
des
nationalisms
Multilateralismus unter
is
Druck, wie
putting
das
the
in den
idea of
letzten Jahrzehnten in dem
multilateralism
Umfang
under
nie der
pressure,
Fall
as it
gewesen
has
ist.
never been the
Das
case
Völkerrecht
over the
wird
past decades.
relativiert, es
International
wird
law is
gebrochen, das
relativized, it is
internationale
even
Handelssystem
violated.
und seine
The international trade
Institutionen
system and its
stehen vor
institutions
ernsthaftem
are
Bewährungsprobe.
seriously tested.
Und für uns sind
And
dies
for us,
die Auswirkungen
these
einer
are the
zunehmenden
effects of
Fragmentierung
an
der
increasing
Weltordnung,
fragmentation of the
in der
world order,
Machtpolitik und die
where power
kurzfristigen
politics and enforcing
Interessendurchsetzungen
short-term
dort zur
interests
Norm
become
werden,
the
dann wird
norm.
das auf
And
Kosten von
this at the
internationalen
expense
Regeln
of
und
international
Rechtsgrundlagen
rules
geschehen. Und
and
das halten
legal
wir für den
principles. And
falschen
we
Weg.
believe
Mit
that this
anderen
is the wrong
Worten,
way. So in other
das Recht des
words,
Stärkeren
the
hat jeder
law of the
Konjunktur,
strongest is
nicht aber
on
die
the
Stärke
rise,
des
but
Rechtes.
not the strength of law.
Wir nehmen diese Entwicklung aber
So
auch nicht
this
nur
is
zur
something that we
Kenntnis.
do not only
Wir
notice
lassen uns in
as
unseren
a development,
Überzeugungen auch nicht beirren.
we are not
Eine
being deterred in our
multilaterale,
convictions.
auf
A
vereinbarten
multilateral
Regeln
order
basierte
which
Ordnung ist und
is
bleibt die beste
based
Antwort
on
auf die
agreed
Frage
rules.
unserer
This
Zeit.
is the best response to the
Die hat es
issues
uns
of our
erst
time.
erlaubt, durch Einbindung in die
It only enabled
europäischen,
us through being
transatlantischen und
included in the
globalen
European
Institutionen
transatlantic
sowie
and
durch
global
wirtschaftliches
institutions and through
Wachstum
economic growth
und
and trade
Handelsbeziehungen wieder zu
relations
einem
to become
anerkannten
a
Mitglied der
recognized
Weltgemeinschaft zu
member
werden.
of the global
Unsere
society.
auf Export ausgerichtete
Our
Wirtschaft ist auf
economy
eine
that's aimed
stabile,
at exports is
verlässliche
heavily relying
Wirtschafts-
on a
und
stable,
Handelsordnung
reliable
angewiesen.
economic and trade order.
Und unsere
And our
Sicherheitsinteressen
security
können wir am
interests
besten in
can be
belastbaren
best
Bündnissen,
asserted in resilient
aber auch durch eine
alliances, but also
stabile
through a
Architektur
stable
von
architecture
Abrüstungsregimen
of
wahren.
disarmament regimes.
Und die großen
And
Zukunftsaufgaben
the
wie
major
der
tasks
Schutz
of the
des
future,
Klimas,
like
der
protecting
Meere
the climate
oder der
and the
Kampf
seas,
gegen Epidemien,
or
die
combating
werden wir aus
epidemics,
Sicht der Bundesregierung nur miteinander,
can
nicht
only be
gegeneinander
tackled
bewältigen
together
können.
and
Dafür
not
gibt es
against each
viele
other.
aktuelle Beispiele.
At least this is what the current
Uns
government
stellt
thinks.
sich zum
And there are
Beispiel
many
ganz
recent
akut die
examples.
Frage, wie wir
For
in
instance, we are
Deutschland in einer
very
zunehmend
urgently asking the question
fragmentierten
how
Welt
we
mit
in
wachsender
Germany, in an
Instabilitäten
increasingly
und
fragmented
zunehmenden
world with growing
Nationalismen einen
instabilities and increasing
konkreten,
nationalisms, how we
vielleicht
can
auch über das
make a concrete
hinausgehenden
contribution,
Beitrag zu
maybe even going
leisten,
beyond
die
that,
regelbasierte Ordnung zu
in
verteidigen
order to
und
defend
womöglich
the
auch zu
rule-based
stärken.
order and even strengthen
Ich
it.
denke natürlich in
And of
erster
course,
Linie an die
first
Rolle
and
der
foremost,
Europäischen
I'm thinking
Union.
of the role of the European Union in this
Europa ist,
context.
wenn wir einig sind,
Europe
immer noch
is,
stark genug,
if it
einen
is
Unterschied zu machen
united,
in der Welt.
strong enough to
Wir
make
sind
a difference in the
ökonomisch stark,
world.
gewinnen
We are
außenpolitisch an
economically
Gewicht und
strong,
haben
we
eine
are
große
gaining in
Softpower.
foreign policy
Man
importance,
hört
and
uns
we
zu
have
und
a
ist
great soft
bereit, sich
power.
überzeugen zu
People
lassen.
listen
Nicht
to
immer,
us and they are ready to be convinced by us. Not
aber wenn wir
always,
das nicht schaffen, als
but if
Europäer
we
gemeinsam
do not manage
unsere Interessen zu
to
vertreten,
stand for our
werden wir
interests
vermutlich meistens überhaupt
united
keine
as
Chance
Europeans,
dazu.
then mostly, probably, we won't get a chance to do this.
Die Frage,
So,
welche Zukunft der
the
Multilateralismus
question
und die
is,
liberale
what is the future
Weltordnung
of
haben, das
multilateralism
wird
and
allerdings
what is the
nicht
future
alleine
of
in
the liberal
Europa
world
entschieden.
order? This is not decided in
Vieles
Europe
davon wird
alone.
abhängen, ob wir es schaffen,
Many things will
gemeinsame
depend
Sache
on
zu
whether
machen mit
we
den
are
Partnern
able
weltweit, die
to
unser
make common
Interesse
cause with our
und die
partners
Überzeugung von der
worldwide
Notwendigkeit
that are
liberaler
sharing
Werte
our
und
interest and
multilateraler
our
Diplomatie
conviction
teilen.
that
Wir
it
wissen,
is
dass das
necessary to
keine
share
leichte
liberal
Aufgabe ist,
values and
gerade
multilateral
zurzeit.
diplomacy. We know this is no easy task, especially not at the
Und das habe
moment.
ich gerade in
And
der letzten Woche meinem
last
Besuch
week,
in Washington auch erfahren können.
I could learn this when I was on
Damit wir
my
auch schon beim ersten
inaugural
Beispiel für die
visit in
Bedeutung
Washington.
konkreter
And this
multilateraler
gives me
Lösungen
the
sind.
first example of the
Das
significance of
Nuklearabkommen
specific
mit dem Iran
multilateral
steht
solutions. The
wie
nuclear
kaum ein
agreement with
anderer Fall
Iran,
für die
like hardly
Chancen,
any
aber
other
auch für
case,
die
stands
aktuelle
for the
Krise des
opportunities but also
Multilateralismus.
for the current
Die
crisis of
einseitige Bekündigung des
multilateralism.
Abkommens
The
durch Washington
unilateral
ist
withdrawal from the
ein schwerer
agreement by
Rückschlag und
Washington
für uns
is
bis
a
heute
major
nicht
setback.
nachvollziehbar.
And until the very day, we do not
Zumindest
understand,
außen- und sicherheitspolitisch.
at least not from the foreign and
Ich denke,
security
den
policy
Multilateralismus
perspective.
über den Iran hinaus
It
auf die
is
Probe,
putting
denn schließlich ist
multilateralism
das
beyond
Abkommen vom
Iran to a test,
Sicherheitsrat der
because
Vereinten
this
Nationen
is an
einstimmig
agreement
unterzeichnet.
that was unanimously
Dessen
endorsed by
Überwachung
the
wird
United
durch die
Nations Security
internationale
Council, and
Atomenergiebehörde
the
gewährleistet.
International Atomic Energy Agency
Und
is
als
monitoring
Europäer
this
haben wir uns
agreement. So as
entschlossen, und das in
Europeans,
großer
we
Geschlossenheit
decided,
in
and
diesem
this
Abkommen zu bleiben.
with great
Teilen das
unitedness,
Ziel,
to
die
stay
Substanz
within this
des
agreement.
Nuklearabkommens
We
trotz
share
der
the
neuen
aim to
Politik der
preserve
USA zu
the
bewahren.
substance of the nuclear
Aus
agreement
unserer
despite
Sicht,
the new
insbesondere
policies from
aus
the
Sicht der
United States.
sogenannten
From our
E3,
perspective,
Großbritannien,
especially from the
Frankreich und
perspective of the
Deutschland,
E3,
ist
the
das
UK,
Abkommen nicht nur ein
France and Germany, this
Meilenstein
agreement is not
internationaler
only a
Diplomatie
milestone
und
in
tragisches
international
Element der
diplomacy
globalen
and a
nuklearen
most important element of the
Nichtverbreitungsarchitektur.
global nuclear
Das Abkommen ist
non-proliferation
zentral
architecture. No,
für die
it is
regionale
pivotal
Stabilität
for
im
the regional
gesamten Nahen
stability
Osten und
in the
berührt
entire
damit
Middle East, and
unsere
it is touching upon
ureigensten
our
europäischen
very
und auch
own
deutschen
European and
Sicherheitsinteressen.
German security
Und
interests.
so schwer das auch werden wird, wir machen uns
Even
keine
though it is going to be
Illusionen,
difficult, we
wir werden
are
nichts
not
unversucht
having any
lassen,
illusions.
dieses
We will
Abkommen
not
zu
leave
erhalten, weil wir
anything
glauben,
untried in order to preserve this agreement,
so
because we
unvollständig es
believe,
sein mag,
even though it might be
dass
imperfect,
die Welt ohne ein solches Abkommen,
without such an
wenn alles auf
agreement,
Null zurückgestellt
if
wird,
everything goes back
alles
to
andere
zero,
sicherer werden wird.
will certainly not
Dazu
become a
gehört
safer
auch
place.
das
And this is why we need to talk with our partners in the region, and over and above that, we are seeking talks with those within the European Union and others elsewhere who are interested to preserve this agreement and the multilateral strategy that is behind this. So this means we will still be striving to fulfill the hopes of Iran for a recovery of its economy and good trade relations, as long as Iran is prepared and demonstrates that it is meeting its obligations that arise from the agreement. And over and above that, we are leading a critical dialogue with Tehran on the regional role in Syria and on its ballistic missile program, both of which do not come without problems. At the end of the day, it will become difficult to develop a positive agenda with Iran as long as its neighbors perceive the country as a threat to stability and peace in the region. And this is, of course, something we need to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, in a couple of days, next week on the 8th of June, Germany presumably will be elected to become a Security Council member for the years 2019 and 2020. So we hope that this will be a successful election, and we have spent a lot of time thinking about this for the case that we will be part of the Security Council as a non-permanent member, especially when it comes to the topics we would like to put on the agenda. And basically, there is one thing that is being made very clear, and this is that we are ready to assume responsibility, also internationally. And everybody knows this from their different backgrounds and experiences, that in the Security Council you really need to live up to your convictions, because at the end of the day, all major conflicts in this world will be discussed there. And as a member of this Security Council, we will have to also form an opinion and voice this opinion. So our membership falls into a very important but also very difficult time. Over the past years, the Security Council, unfortunately, was remarked more by a blockade and less by common action. So the still unresolved war in Syria has become a cruel symbol of this. And in the United Nations Security Council, within our means, we will place the topics on the agenda that are important for the preservation of the multilateral world order. And the political process in Syria also requires new impotence. So we will do everything within our power to further develop within the context of the small group that is composed of the United States, UK, France, and Saudi Arabia. And we would like to try and find a way in order to further restore the peace process in Syria under the umbrella of what has already been put underway in the UN-led Geneva process. So this is one topic, and another topic that we will be dealing with is how do we handle the tensions in eastern Ukraine. After 5 years of fighting, the implementation of the Minsk agreement requires new momentum, because the momentum that should actually be there was completely lost. And this is why, together with Foreign Minister Lavrov, we agreed on consultations in the Normandy format at the foreign ministers level very soon, because we know that without a dialogue with Russia in Ukraine, as well as in many other crises, little will be accomplished. But this is not a dialogue for the sake of a dialogue. It is a dialogue that should mainly lead to one thing, and that is to results. So, rightly, the community will look at us in New York as well, because in this conflict especially, we assumed responsibility early on. And in New York, for the case that we are elected to the Security Council, we would like to try and diffuse crises early on and try and stabilize countries after conflicts permanently. And we would also like to try and understand this in a more comprehensive sense and try to see climate change as part of the security problem. We're supporting Secretary General Guterres when it comes to making the United Nations more powerful, especially in the field of conflict prevention and peacekeeping, and also to make it more effective. We do not only want to arrive when it is too late. So, together with small island states, for example, that are the hardest hit by climate change, we would also like to put climate change on the agenda of the Security Council. We support the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and its implementation shall provide the basis for an equitable, sustainable, and peaceful world. More international cooperation also needs to be applicable to those regional global challenges that are not in the headlines every day, but they are just as important. And this is why in New York and beyond that, we will try and advocate multilateral solutions, be this within the United Nations system, in the G7 and the G20, in cooperation with the European Union and other regional organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the United Nations Security Council, we still want to actively support African interests, because the African Union and its regional organizations are not only the central crisis managers on the continent. In a world that is shaped by different power struggles and power poles and power paroles, this is something where Africa will play an increasingly shaping role. And when I visited the African Union in Addis Ababa a couple of weeks ago, I ensured that Germany and Europe will support the African Union reforms in the field of crisis management and economic integration, including the Continental Free Trade Zone. And I underscored our support for this. We know from our own experience in Europe that this requires a lot of patience. For Europe, a strategic partnership with Africa becomes all the more important. Peace and security, population growth, youth unemployment and migration, sustainable development and fair trade relations. These are the common challenges on our neighboring continent, and we have to tackle these also because of our very own interests. With the Compact with Africa initiative, Germany last year created an instrument so that in the context of the G20 partnership with Africa, we can make specific contributions to private sector investment and to creating urgently required jobs in the Compact states. What remains important is that we need to ensure continuity in the context of G20 for this initiative and to bundle the commitment of G20 states. Ladies and gentlemen, the crisis of the World Trade Organization, the US tariffs on steel and aluminium, and the threats with a view to the automotive industry show us that we can no longer take for granted the advantages of free trade and an international set of rules. When I was in the United States last week, just before my talk with Foreign Minister Pompeo, State Secretary Pompeo, I received the news that in the United States they were considering to use legislation according to which, in the case of a threat to national security, there will be import tariffs on specific goods. And in the United States, they were considering to apply this to the import of vehicles, that is, of cars, and that this would specifically be aimed at German cars is something which is obvious. And this is why I asked Mike Pompeo. I said, Mike, you cannot be serious about this. You believe that German cars are threatening your national security interests? Quite on the contrary, German cars are making American roads safer.
And
the reaction in the State Department was a bit different from right here, right now. But we will have to continue our talks on this. So, ladies and gentlemen, protectionism is at the moment shaping many discussions and deplorably many talks that we at the moment are holding with Washington. The foreign trade balance and many other issues play a role as well, but I don't believe that the foreign trade balance between two countries should be the benchmark for their political relations. I believe that global trade is not a global zero-sum game. It is an important driver of growth, it promotes innovation, and it creates jobs. And for this, it requires a functioning rule-based trade system. And this is why we are called upon more than ever to defend these accomplishments and to continue to shape the global economic system actively on the basis of rules that we once all pledged to agree on. And here we need to bundle the influence of those partners in the world that are still counting on the significance of an open, a reliable, a transparent global trade system. And this is why, together with our European partners, we are advocating comprehensive bilateral free trade agreements with partners worldwide, and also strengthening the multilateral trade system of the WTO. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of multilateralism, the 2030 Agenda, economic and social perspectives in Africa, and a free world trade. All of these are topics that are very high on the G20 agenda, and this is where they ought to be. So to find agreement of the G20 states is sometimes not always easy, and it hasn't become easier. And this became clear 1 week ago on the occasion of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in Buenos Aires. But in view of the multitude of challenges, there is no reasonable alternative to this and no alternative to continue trying. This, of course, holds true for other topics, and it also holds true for other fora, because there are countless examples of what we can achieve, also together with the United States, if we all work towards the same goal. Part of this is that Europe, the United States, and many other states should not recognize and have not recognized the international law violation in Crimea, and that in the context of the counter-ISIL coalition, we achieved important successes in the fight against terrorism in Iraq and in Syria. But, and this is clear, the exchange at the level of governments is no longer enough in order to tackle many of the global challenges. Global governance and effective multilateralism require the active participation of civil society, at-large private companies, researchers and scientists, mayors, and, of course, think tank representatives. The T20 Global Solutions Summit is a fantastic format in order to make these voices heard. It's a forum to think out of the box and to find innovative solutions for global challenges. Solutions, results. And this is why I would like to close with the words of Jeffrey Sachs, who last year, on the occasion of this forum, gave us the roadmap. He said, "It is not your job to be quiet or pleasant." So, please do challenge politics and continue to do this. This is more urgently needed than ever before. Thank you very much for your attention.